Hi everyone. So in the last video, I released my full framework that explains my claim how integrative thinking produces emotional intelligence. This video is the full explanation of that framework that connects integrative thinking, emotional intelligence, and intelligent behavior. But to understand this framework, we first need to understand what emotional intelligence actually is and what it's not. Many people understand emotional intelligence through the behaviors and traits associated with it. And there's a reason people think this way. Most mainstream explanations of emotional intelligence focus on observable behaviors such as self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, and social skills. And even the classic definition of emotional intelligence is given as the ability to recognize and manage your own emotions and the emotions of others around you. So we assume that emotional intelligence is these behaviors. But it's not. Behaviors are just the surface. They are the final expression, the output. And output is not the mechanism itself. My framework argues that emotional intelligence emerges from a specific type of thinking process. And unless you understand that process, you cannot consistently develop emotional intelligence. The process I'm talking about is a cognitive version of integrative thinking. And it's an important distinction. Because I am not talking about the managerial or strategy version taught in business schools. Here, integrative thinking is a cognitive mechanism. Now, while my framework presented here is original, many of the cognitive principles behind it appear throughout Indian philosophical traditions, especially in the way Krishna broadens Arjun's interpretation of the situation before his unstable emotional state leads him to abandon his dharma. And that idea sits at the center of this framework, which is how you think shapes how you feel, and how you feel shapes how you act. I've repeatedly explained this in the last two videos, that behavior is an output of your thinking style. If the thinking changes, the emotional output changes. And when the emotional output changes, the behavior changes. My work explains the underlying thinking process. This is the work I'm building. So without further ado, let's understand the process behind these three layers of my framework. Let's begin. Now my work sits on a very specific cognitive loop, where layer 1 is interpretation, the layer where integrative thinking lives. Integrative thinking is a cognitive mechanism where the mind is able to hold multiple interpretations of a situation at the same time without collapsing into extremes, then expand those interpretations into their full range of possibilities, and finally bring those possibilities together into one unified understanding before you respond. And when I say integrative thinking, I am not talking about holding two external opposing models. I am talking about the mind's ability to hold multiple internal interpretations of the same situation at the same time. This is similar to what Indian philosophy called buddhi, which is the clarity to see the whole picture before emotion takes over. In modern cognitive language, I would call this interpretation integration. Here, the mind learns to see the whole picture instead of reacting to fragments of a situation. When multiple interpretations are brought together into a unified understanding, thinking becomes clearer and more grounded. Now, here's one simple example. In a conflict, if you see the full picture instead of just thinking about your own side, the escalation of that conflict drops immediately. Now that is integrative thinking in action. because it broadens your interpretation of the situation before you respond. Now, layer 2 is emotional output. This is where emotional intelligence emerges, and it emerges directly from layer 1, which means that when your interpretation becomes broader and more integrated, your emotional reactions become more stable. Because when your interpretation of the situation expands, your mind becomes less emotionally attached to its first conclusion, which makes your emotional reaction more stable. Now, your emotional reaction did not form from an instant judgment. That's the bridge. This is how integrative thinking produces emotional intelligence. And this aligns with what Indian philosophy described as Vivek, which is the discernment that allows a person to respond with clarity rather than be carried away by immediate reactions. In modern cognitive language, I would call this emotion integration, which is the ability to let emotions inform you without letting them take over. Because fragmented thinking tends to produce more unstable emotional reactions, whereas integrated thinking tends to support more regulated emotional reactions. So the pattern is clear. The way you think shapes the way you feel. Now, one quick example. Let's say your boyfriend or girlfriend don't reply to your message. Now, a reactive mind would jump to the first conclusion. They are ignoring me. And you feel hurt and angry. But integrative thinking lets you hold other possibilities at the same time. They might be busy, or they might be dealing with something personal. Now, your emotion is no longer tied to a single interpretation. That's why the feeling settles and your emotional response becomes more balanced. Now, layer 3 is behavior, which is the final expression of your internal integration. Behavior doesn't start on its own. It comes directly from layer 1 and layer 2 working together. When your interpretation is integrated and your emotional output is stable, your actions become more consistent with what you actually feel and think. That's why behavior is not random. It's the visible output of how you think and how you feel. And this aligns with what Indian philosophy called samanvay, which is the ability to integrate how you feel with the consequence your action will create. So your actions stay aligned. In modern cognitive language, I would call this outcome integration, which is the ability to balance short-term emotion with long-term consequence. This is what turns your intentions into aligned actions. When outcome integration is strong, your decisions stop contradicting your values. So the mechanism is clear. Layer 1 shapes how you interpret a situation. Layer 2 shapes how that interpretation becomes an emotional response. And layer 3 is the behavior that emerges from those two layers working together. Now let's take a simple example. Let's say someone deliberately provokes you to start an argument and damage your reputation. Now your first impulse is to react immediately. But integrative thinking helps you think what your response is likely to create. Will reacting impulsively improve the situation or make it worse for me? So instead of acting on impulse alone, you choose a response that does both, protects your dignity and neutralizes the provocation. Because you've considered the consequences of your actions. Now that is intelligent behavior in action. So, when people understand emotional intelligence as behaviors and traits, they are usually looking at the output. They are looking at what becomes visible in behavior. But the real mechanism sits underneath it. Layer 1 shapes how you interpret a situation. Layer 2 shapes how that interpretation becomes an emotional response. And layer 3 is the behavior that emerges from those two layers working together. This is the mechanism that integrative thinking produces emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence ultimately expresses itself through intelligent behavior. And many of the principles around it have been explored in Indian philosophical traditions thousands of years ago. Krishna may not have given us a modern diagram, but he did teach us the principles that point in this direction, which is buddhi for clarity, vivek for discernment, and samanvay for integrating emotion and logic so your action stays aligned. And this is the full explanation of the mechanism behind my claim that integrative thinking produces emotional intelligence. Thank you for watching, and until next time, keep building a better you.